This interview is part of the James J. Blanchard Living Library of Michigan Political History.
Doug Fraser is former president of the UAW, worked his way up in the labor movement, and is now a special professor at Wayne University along with his good friend Irv Bluestone. I'm Tom Downs. I've known Doug for, 20, 30, 40 years?
Stop at 40.
Stop at 40, okay. We'll let them know how old you are. So let's start right in now. Most of these interviews we do a little bit. Where were you born, Doug?
I was born in Glasgow, Scotland, Tom.
Glasgow, Scotland. When did you come over?
Well, the pattern in those days for all Europeans coming to the United States, the father came first, got established, and he sent for his family. So my dad came here. It was about 1923. I was about 7. And about 9 months later, he sent for my mom and my brother and sister and myself. He located in Detroit, went to work in the Studebaker plant, and was an auto worker for the rest of his life.
So he came direct from Scotland to Detroit.
Well, it was a stop in Paterson, New Jersey, but only a momentary stop.
How did he happen to pick Detroit, just that they were high?
The jobs, and basically that's why people left Europe. I mean, it wasn't an oppressed dictatorship or anything like that in Scotland, but there just wasn't the economic opportunity to rear a family, so he looked to America. Yeah. And he loved it from the moment he got here, I think.
Was he a skilled worker in Scotland?
He was an electrician, yeah, and active in the labor movement. He's the secretary of his branch.
Yeah, because there are a lot of the skilled workers were the Scots, and a few English.
Yeah, the tool and die shops in the auto industry were populated by English, Scots, and Germans. Yeah. You had a lot of foreign-born in trades.
Well, then, how did you start out in the labor movement?
Well, I suppose you could argue that maybe as a member of the union before I went to work because of the environment at home, the conversation. Sure. And I decided after about a year that I'd run for second shift steward and then day shift steward and committeeman. I was local union president when I was 27. And then I went to work as a regional director, regional representative, I should say. Then after the Chrysler strike in 1950, Walter Reuther asked me to become his administrative assistant, and then from there I was elected regional director and vice president and president.
Let's back up a minute. Which local were you in when you started?
227 is the DeSoto local.
DeSoto.
Young folks out there wouldn't know what that is. I used to be a car built by the Chrysler Corporation.
Yes, I remember the DeSoto.
I bet you can.
Yes. All right. I got as many not gray white hairs as you have, Doug. I don't mind the gray. It's the balding that bothers me. Well, now, this is a general question, and you spent your life really in the labor movement, and you came with good credentials from your parents, good labor genes, if you want to call it. What would you say as president your main success was?
Well, I think you have to look at it retrospectively. At the time this was happening, I didn't realize it was such a great success. But I think, Tom, the role I played, the union played in saving the Chrysler Corporation. You know, there's a revisionist history out there that says that Lee Iacocca saved the Chrysler Corporation, but Lee Iacocca didn't save the Chrysler Corporation. The Chrysler workers saved the Chrysler Corporation. First of all, they made enormous economic sacrifices. That was the years of the Carter administration. The individual who's running for president at that time, Ronald Reagan, was against the whole proposition of what they call a bailout. So we had a Democratic Congress. Iacocca was not a folk hero at that time, and so he didn't have the clout that he subsequently gained by his reputation. So it was the union really that saved the Chrysler Corporation. Now, as I said, I didn't realize at the time. Because the company was in desperate straits. We're on the very brink of bankruptcy. The Wall Street Journal said, you know, why don't we just let it die and give it a decent burial? And you take coming from that period until in that last year, the Chrysler workers on average got $8,000 in profit sharing, which was first negotiated during that terrible period. So that was a terrible period, and I, obviously didn't recognize the significance of the accomplishment until later years.
Well, I remember our mutual friend Billy Ford in Congress. He told me when the lobbying was going on in Washington that the Chrysler just didn't know what was going on, and it was the UAW that knew its way around. Would you verify that?
Oh yeah, and we brought all the local union people there. I can remember specifically there was some dispute within the administration. There were some political risks involved, asking for $1.5 billion in loan guarantees, and for a while, some people in the administration were reluctant. But I can recall the morning that they decided to go forward. It was out at Vice President Mondale's house at a breakfast meeting, and it was myself and Mark Stepp, who was then director of the Chrysler Department, Howard Pastor, who was our Washington lobbyist, excuse me, Vice President Mondale, Secretary Miller, Secretary Treasurer, and Stu Eisenstadt, who was President Carter's principal administrative assistant on economic affairs. And it was at that meeting we talked through the problems, and the administration said at that meeting that they would go forward.
Now, it was both the bailout and the union giving up some economic things. What did you get in turn for that?
Well,
besides your jobs, which was important.
Yeah, it was important. It was just, to save the corporation. Well, we tried to lay the groundwork for the future. And one of those was, of course, the profit sharing. And right before the loan guarantee bailout, we made our first set of concessions. We got representation on the Chrysler board.
Now, there'd been big argument. Was that the first profit sharing in the big three?
No, American Motors was actually in 1964.
Yeah.
And it was first in the big three, you're right. Yeah. But in the auto industry, it was the second. Yeah, it was the first, the profit sharing was the first in the big three.
Yeah. So that really, now there'd been arguments that profit sharing would have people give up their loyalty to the union and be too much pro-management. You want to respond? You'd heard that argument.
Yeah, I heard that argument over the years, and first I didn't know if it was right or not. As a theory. But I can tell you now, after particularly the Ford workers who have received profit sharing year after year after year, I think from the beginning, we negotiated that. I happened to be there in 1982, again, when there was no profits. Easiest time to negotiate profit sharing when there's no profits or even the hope of profits. But in any event, the Ford profit sharing is paid off more frequently. And I think they've got a accumulated total now about $14,000. So, but there's no signs whatsoever that this results in workers saying, well, look, I'm really closer to the company than union. They know how they got it.
Yeah, they know they got it through the union.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think you can answer that very realistically. Now I want to jump to another point. I was very active on the Employment Security Commission, and at one time, workers had to wait a week before they filed for unemployment comp. Then we got that eliminated. Then there was the attempt to get it back in, and it was about to get in when Chrysler wrote a letter saying they wanted to keep the waiting week. And that pulled the rug out from under those that wanted to eliminate. Were you involved in that, or do you want to tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just have sort of a faint recollection. We had a lot going on at that time, but obviously we talked to the corporation about it.